on this point about tax reform, I should say, there are many hoping, to the governor's point, that we'll get a quick turnaround on that, right? And you have the House Republican Policy Chairman, Congressman Luke Messer, as our next guest. Play a pretty big role in this, Congressman. So pick up on Governor Palente's point. Can it get done quickly?
Yeah, I mean, listen, we've got a lot of work to do, Connell, in the coming weeks and months. Tax reform will be a very big part of that. Donald Trump's promised it. Both Mitch McConnell and Paul Ryan have promised it as well, and you'll see us get to work on that right out of the gate here in the first few weeks of Congress. You'll also see, you mentioned the tremendous regulatory burden that's come from the Obama administration. Literally hundreds of major regulatory regimes passed. Just in the last 7.5 years, $700 billion annually added to the burden, the regulatory burden on our economy, which is just a giant tax on the American people. Every one of those regulations is passed on to the consumer. So this week you'll see us go to work on that as well.
Won't that be more difficult in some ways? I mean, there are a lot of special interests involved, a lot of members of Congress that have pet projects involved with some of the companies in the industries where regulations are in place. Now, I'm sure some of it can be undone through executive order, but once it gets to your level and it needs congressional legislation, that can be more difficult than some of the tax issues?
Yeah, well, this week we're going to, when we first get back in Congress, work on a couple of bills that would make that a little easier. One is the REINS Act, which basically restores Article 1 power, says for every regulation that would have $100 million impact on the economy, that Congress should have to approve those regulations before they become law. And the Midnight Rules Act, the Obama administration has passed literally dozens of regulations here in the final weeks of their administration. We want to be able to bundle those together and vote on them through the Congressional Review Act to have those rein back in as well. Tax reform will be important, too. The advantage there is much of that tax reform effort can be passed through reconciliation, which puts the filibuster aside in the Senate and lets us do that work. And then, as your prior, Mr. Pawlente, your prior speaker also mentioned, then we get through the other hard work of energy reform and health care reform and the work to get this economy going again. I think people are optimistic about what can happen under this new president. You see it in the stock market. You see it in these new announcements of job creation. And we just now have to make sure that optimism continues by delivering through Congress.
Well, that's the challenge, right? There is some we talked about having a skeptical eye on some of these issues. And one of the things when it comes specifically to taxes is to say that, hey, can this be done in what's known as a revenue neutral way? I mean, can you really cut taxes and to increase spending, which is also being proposed, more infrastructure spending as a matter of policy by this new incoming administration, and not increase the deficit and not take on more debt. I mean, it sounds good. It sounds like maybe cut from other areas, but hey, come on. We've seen people try this before. It's not that easy, right?
Yeah, it's not easy to do. Look, the number one way to solve our fiscal challenges in Congress is to have a growing economy. And we need to make the policy decisions it takes to get our economy going again.
So you're willing to add to deficits? You're in that camp in the short term in order to get growth? That's the trade-off.
I mean, we're going to have to work our way through this. I mean, we've got a lot that needs to be done. Frankly, we've had stagnant growth over the course of the last 8 years. I think we can pass meaningful tax reform that will get this economy growing again. And the best way to have more tax revenue is to have more jobs, so you have more taxpayers.
I understand that. You're going to get pushed. That's where we're going to get the push and pull, right?
Yeah,
that's where we're going to get the fight from a guy like Mick Mulvaney, I'm sure you know, who's going over to the Office of Management and Budget, who's voted against raising the debt ceiling, is seen as a hawk on the deficit and on the debt, and maybe pushing back internally just within the administration on some of these things, right?
Well, we've got to meet multiple priorities. I mean, we still have a fiscal crisis. We still have the challenge of balancing our budgets and making sure we're not stealing the future of our kids and grandkids. But we've got to get a growing economy working as well. We'll find our way through these issues in the coming weeks and months. What I'm confident of is I'm going to be a lot happier with the decisions we're able to make with President Trump than I would have been if we'd had a different result in the election just a few weeks ago.
Congressman Messer, thank you for joining us. Congressman Messer out of Indiana, where I believe he's thinking about running for Senate, right? So maybe that's when's the next time around? A little chuckle. We'll take it as a yes. He's in. Now, thank you very much, sir.